The dust rose like a living thing as the wagon wheels groaned to a stop at the edge of the frontier town. Noon heat pressed down hard, the kind that made men restless and horses mean. People were already gathering, boots crunching on dry earth, voices low but eager. Auctions always drew a crowd, but this one felt different. Something in the air carried unease, like a storm that hadn't yet shown its clouds. Ethan Cole stood apart from the others, one hand resting on the rough handle of his axe. He hadn't planned on stopping in this town. He rarely planned much at all. The mountains had taught him that plans broke easily, like rotten branches underfoot. He was a lumberjack by trade, living alone in a cabin miles from anyone else, cutting timber for railroads and mines. Weeks could pass without him speaking to another soul. Loneliness was a weight he carried quietly, the way other men carried guns. He'd come into town only to sell a load of timber and buy supplies, flour, salt, lamp oil, maybe a new pair of gloves. Then he heard the bell. Clang, clang, clang! The auctioneer's bell cut through the noise, sharp and insistent. People turned. Some smiled. Some frowned. A few women pulled their children closer. Ethan followed their gaze toward the wooden platform near the sheriff's office. That's when he saw her. She stood on the platform with a sack over her head, coarse burlap tied loosely around her neck. Her hands were bound in front of her, wrists thin, fingers clenched, as if holding onto the last piece of herself. She wore a plain dress, dust-stained and too big for her frame. She didn't move much, but something about her stillness drew the eye. Not fear exactly, something quieter, endurance. Ethan felt an uncomfortable tightening in his chest. He didn't know why. He told himself it was none of his business. The frontier was full of hard stories, and you learned early not to pry into every one of them if you wanted to survive. The auctioneer cleared his throat and raised his voice. All right, folks, settle down now. This here's a lawful auction sanctioned by the town council. Property seized from unpaid debts. Property. The word hit Ethan harder than it should have. This woman, the auctioneer continued, tapping his ledger, was left behind when her husband died, owing money to half the town. No families come forward. No one's paid her debts. So here we are. A low murmur ran through the crowd. Someone laughed. Can she cook? Another voice chimed in. What's under the sack? The auctioneer raised a hand. Rules are rules. Sack stays on till the sale's done. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He didn't like the sound of any of this. Still, he stayed. Maybe because he wanted to see how it ended. Maybe because some part of him already knew he wouldn't be able to walk away. Starting bid, the auctioneer called, $5. Silence. $5 wasn't much. You could buy a decent horse for $20, a good rifle for $15. $5 for a human being should have sparked outrage. Instead, it sparked disinterest. No one. The auctioneer pressed. A man in a greasy hat snorted. Not worth the trouble. Another shook his head. Can't see her face. Could be sickly. The auctioneer frowned. All right then. $4. Still nothing. The woman shifted slightly on the platform. The burlap sack brushed against her shoulder. For just a moment, Ethan thought he heard her breathing, slow, controlled, as if she refused to let panic take hold in front of strangers. $3, the auctioneer said, his voice less confident now. Ethan's hand curled around the axe handle. He didn't know what he was doing there anymore. He should have left. This wasn't his world. He chopped trees. He minded his own business. He didn't buy people. $2, the auctioneer called almost reluctantly. The crowd stirred. A few men exchanged glances, calculating. $2 was cheap enough to be tempting. Too cheap. Before Ethan could think himself out of it, his voice rose above the noise. 2. Every head turned. Ethan felt heat rush to his face. He wasn't a loud man. Speaking up like that felt like stepping into a spotlight he'd avoided his whole life. The auctioneer blinked. $2, I hear. Any advance? Silence again, but this time it felt heavier. The men who might have bid hesitated. Something about Ethan's presence, broad-shouldered, bearded, eyes steady, gave them pause. He didn't look like a man buying on a whim. Going once, the auctioneer said. Ethan's heart thudded harder than it ever did, swinging an axe. Going twice. The woman's head tilted slightly, as if she'd turned toward his voice beneath the sack. Sold, the auctioneer declared, bringing the gavel down. To the gentleman for $2. Just like that, it was done. A ripple of reactions spread through the crowd. Surprise, curiosity, judgment. Ethan ignored them all. He walked toward the platform, boots heavy on the dirt, each step feeling unreal. The sheriff cut the ropes binding the woman's wrists and gestured to Ethan. She's yours now. Take her and go. Ethan swallowed. I don't aim to hurt her. The sheriff shrugged. That's between you and her. Ethan turned to the woman. Up close he could see how slight she was. The sack hid her face, but it couldn't hide the tension in her shoulders. We can leave, he said quietly, not sure if she could hear him through the fabric. You don't have to be afraid of me. For a moment she didn't move. Then slowly she nodded. They walked out of town together, a strange pair. Whispers followed them, but no one tried to stop them. Once they were beyond the last building, Ethan stopped near his wagon. He hesitated, then gently reached for the knot at her neck. May I? He asked. Another pause, then a soft nod. He untied the sack and lifted it away. The first thing he noticed was her eyes. Dark, steady, and far older than her years. They met his without flinching. Her face was smudged with dust, and her hair tangled, but there was a quiet strength there that took him by surprise. She studied him in return, as if measuring the kind of man he was. I'm Ethan, he said, feeling suddenly awkward. Ethan Cole. She swallowed, her voice hoarse when she spoke, like it hadn't been used much lately. My name is Clara. The moment the name left her lips, something shifted inside him. It was foolish, he knew that. Her name shouldn't carry that kind of weight. But it did. It grounded her, made her real in a way the sack never allowed. Clara, he repeated, testing it. She nodded. That's all I have left. They stood there in the open land, wind tugging at their clothes, the town already feeling far away. Ethan cleared his throat. I don't have plans for you. Not like that. I live up in the mountains, a cabin. It's rough, but it's safe. You can stay as long as you want. When you're ready to leave, I'll help you. Clara watched him closely, searching for something. Lies, maybe. She must not have found them. I don't have anywhere to go, she said simply. Something in her honesty struck him harder than any accusation. Then you can stay, he replied. No price, no chains. They traveled in silence for a while, the wagon creaking along the trail. The land stretched wide and empty, dotted with scrub and distant hills. Ethan stole glances at her now and then. She sat straight, hands folded in her lap, eyes scanning the horizon like someone who had learned to be alert. As the sun dipped lower, she spoke again. Why did you do it? He knew what she meant. I don't know, he admitted. Didn't feel right leaving you there. She nodded slowly, as if she understood that kind of instinct. Most men don't listen to that feeling. The cabin came into view just as dusk settled. It was small, built of rough-hewn logs, smoke curling from the chimney. Clara took it in quietly. Inside, Ethan lit a lamp and set about making stew. The space was simple but clean. One bed, one table, one chair. He paused, suddenly aware of how that might look. I'll sleep on the floor, he said quickly. Clara shook her head. We'll figure it out. Over dinner, she ate slowly, savoring each bite. Ethan watched her with a mix of concern and respect. She didn't ask for more, but he offered anyway. That night, as the fire crackled low, Clara spoke again. When my husband died, the town stopped seeing me as a person. Ethan listened. They covered my face so no one would have to look at me, so no one would remember I had a name. Her fingers tightened around the cup in her hands. When you asked who I was, when you listened. It mattered. Ethan felt a tightness in his throat he didn't try to hide. Your name matters, he said. You matter. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. They learned the shape of each other's silences. Clara helped around the cabin, tending a small garden, mending clothes. Ethan taught her how to split wood, how to read the weather. Laughter came slowly, but when it did, it felt like a gift. There were moments of tension too, unspoken fears, memories that rose without warning. But each time they faced them together. One evening, as snow began to fall outside, Clara looked at him across the fire. I never thought $2 would buy me a life, she said softly. Ethan shook his head. It didn't buy you anything. It just brought you here. She smiled, a real smile this time. Then I choose to stay." The words settled between them, heavy and warm. In the spring, they rode back into town together. No sacks, no ropes. Clara walked beside Ethan, head held high. People stared, some in shame, some in disbelief. When the preacher asked why they'd come, Ethan answered simply, "We're here to be married." Clara squeezed his hand, and as they stood there, surrounded by the same dust that once reduced her to an auction lot, the frontier bore witness to something rare. A fate not written in gold or blood, but in $2, a name, and a choice that changed everything.